How old are you? Control your runes.
No way, man. I look forward to this moment every week.
Welcome to the Macross Delta Recap Show. This is EXO, along with the Windermere that only has a 30-year lifespan, Celia Rose. Say hi, Celia.
Hello.
And the man in Macross Mecha Manual, Chad.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, episode 6, Decision Overload. What's your overall take, Celia? You go first.
I really like this episode. Um, I think most of my impression came from the watching the Raws. The subs this time came out super, super fast, but
Mm-hmm.
some of it was kind of, I wouldn't say wonky, but some of it was just not great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that I watched it raw before I saw the subs because some of the jokes in the subs might have, I guess, given me a different impression. But I really liked that things are getting really intense. The battle that Delta Squadron had was really, really cool. Like, it was wonderfully animated, and the pacing was really awesome. We got yet another Valkyrie song, and we get to know a little bit more about Windermere that could spell their impending doom. And give us another motivation for why they're deciding to wage war now, instead of, maybe closer to the time that they declared their independence from the new unified government. But overall, I really liked it, especially the battle sequence. I think that was one of my favorite parts of this whole episode.
That was a pretty good battle. But also, when you're talking about the Raw, I felt like I got everything from the Raw, and the subs just confirmed it for me. I didn't have difficulty understanding this episode somehow.
Yeah.
Everything that was happening on screen, you already know the characters, you have the universe set up for you, and this is a moment in the series where you're going to get some payoff about what's been set up and what's happening. And I think it just flows visually and makes for a very dynamic episode. One of the things that's kind of funny is that I'm like Celia in many of the same ways, in that every time we do an episode, it comes along and I'm like, I really like this episode, I really like this episode, and we do that like every time we have
Yeah.
an
It's
episode
been
of this
good.
show. And it's just because it's so true. Like every episode of this show so far has had its pluses and its minuses, but for the most part they've been excellent. And I find
Yeah.
myself, like, just, in spite of myself, just getting into the show more and more. And this episode, it's just so good. Again, I just want to reiterate to, like, everybody that's listening, if you aren't giving this show a chance, you are really missing out on some great Macross entertainment. This is a really good show that's just, if you sold the show short because of the certain elements of it, just give it another chance and get to this episode because it is so worth it.
It starts off before the credits with a little criticizing by Messer towards the Delta Squad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this was a great little sequence that kind of acts as a primer for what's going to happen in the rest of the episode, and they talk a bit about flying technique and what's important, which is, like, of course, technique is, perfecting technique is great, but you're also, you got to make sure that you're not as predictable, which is apparently one of Mirage's flaws with her flying, is that her technique is flawless, but she does everything by the book and has trouble, like, being unpredictable in combat, which makes her an easier opponent to defeat. And then we get to Hayate, where Messer says, his unpredictable dance moves and stuff like that might make him more dynamic on the battlefield, but his pacifist sort of bent is causing him some real problems.
Well, and it really gives you a window too into what we're dealing with Delta Squadron, where Messer's telling the other three pilots, don't do this because you're not skilled enough, but that leaves only two pilots out of the five who are actually skilled enough to pull off the more complicated maneuvers that and be successful defeating an enemy. I mean, that's not a great team structure that you would want to have going into war.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's skip on to the scene right after the opening. We see Captain Johnson, Mulder, and Konami discussing why the UN Spacey hasn't aided them.
Well, with that one, basically, I think what it demonstrated is where Chaos stands in ranking as a private military contractor. My perception of the SMS and Frontier was that they were important enough to get the VF-25 when it was still in beta mode. Like, they were able to get the new tech and have a lot of respect and priority from the UN Spacey. But in Delta, what it seems like is that Chaos is not likely to receive reinforcements from new UN Spacey unless the conflict escalates to a higher level. I can't remember if it was Johnson or Mulders that said it, but one of
No,
them.
it's Mulder.
Yeah, Mulder said that right now they're basically considering it like a skirmish between minor kingdoms or minor planets, and that they're really dealing with bigger issues right now. Although I don't think they realize just how big this issue is about to get. But that's why we're not seeing very many reinforcements. There have been some, but I mean, in one of the past episodes, they sent like maybe 12 units of the 171 Nightmares, I think it was. That's not a lot.
So, Celia, I wanted to ask you this. Why does Mikubo keep giving up Freya shit?
You mean the super shade she threw at Freya again in
What's up
this
with that?
episode?
She keeps doing it.
Oh my god. Well, it's that tough love mentor thing going on. Actually, she and Messer have been running parallel to each other in this
Been
tough love
trading
mentor thing.
notes. They've been
They're
trading notes.
I totally think they have, because they're both being like super hard on their new trainees.
Yep.
And Freya catches Mikumo humming Heinz's song,
What's up with
which
that?
to me is a huge red flag. I'm like, oh no, because I really don't want her to become Grace O'Connor, where she seems nice and great, and then she turns out to be the source of evil and the actual antagonist. I'd really like Mikumo just to keep being the secondary Cheryl that I never knew I needed. But the shade she threw at Freya in this episode, like I wrote it down too, because this line in particular was just stung, where she was saying,
I know where you're going.
yeah, where she was saying, how Heinz has life shining out of his voice, and then she says, "It's strange, right? There's nothing like that in your voice."
What?
Like,
How dare you?
whoa. It was such a good scene, though. I mean, Freya is getting a lot of stuff thrown at her, because she's dealing with a lot, and I think Mikumo is trying to build her up and toughen her, basically.
Well, Freya and Hayate are in the next scene when they're in the restaurant, and we see in the beginning that the restaurant was really like crowded with all these war profiteers.
It's challenging to keep up with demand and whatnot, but I'm sure they're thankful for the business. But there's also some downsides to it too. We have some of the bridge crew from the Elysion in the restaurant talking about all the different changes. About there's all sorts of new businessmen on Ragna who have come to obviously make money regarding this new conflict. So there's talk of war profiteering and whatnot. We have a sequence where Machina and Reyna are sort of criticizing, I guess, what's going on, and then the conversation changes to a bit more personal stuff as well. It goes from politics down to talk about what Mirage is doing, what Hayate is doing as far as their piloting, and Machina takes it upon herself to again criticize the two of them in her own way, even though Hayate is the only one here, because Mirage is again taking her training exceptionally seriously, and just she's not at the restaurant with her friends. Instead, she's training hard to try and improve, to get better, and her devotion is definitely something that's defining her character. But in Hayate's case, he's taken a bunch of criticism from Machina and Reyna, who are talking about his flying technique and how he's really hard on machines, and they appear to discuss the differences between Messer and Hayate in a very amusing sort of way, talking about almost as if they were personal relationships or dates, or could even say there is an inference of sexuality going on there as well, where they talk about how they deal with their women, and how Messer is like such an assured hand, and he knows how to, smoothly treat his machine, like, and to leave his woman feeling good at the end of the night, whereas Hayate is just he's all bluster and just there to wreck everything. He's just
Yeah.
and they're just ripping the poor
I
guy
think you're
apart.
turning on sassy.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I was like, I was reading everything, and I'm like almost worried at one point. I'm like, is this the subs? The subgroup that is putting in all this like sexual innuendo, or is this actually in the script? Because it was pretty amusing and quite unexpected. But yeah, it made for a great sequence. And actually, surprisingly, Hayate takes it to heart and
Yeah.
seems to actually embrace these criticisms and take them in and say, you know what, they might be onto something. Maybe I can make a change and do things better if I take these sort of problems at face value.
Don't do it, Hayate. Don't do it.
I think this scene also provides like I guess a positive side to Messer. So far, all we've seen is grumpy Messer and stressed out Messer.
I
Um,
don't even think that's his name. I think that's just what they call him, because he just messes everything up.
maybe, maybe, but yeah, like how they're talking about, apparently it's not his usual to actually give like verbal criticism. Like Chuck says,
Yeah.
he's like all he does is give you a look, and you've done wrong. But, they build him up as a pilot. They say that he's good, maybe even better than Captain Mulder's. His skills with the VF-31 and his technique using it are really good. So they're trying to, I think what they're giving us is an opportunity to look at Messer from another perspective, as well as giving Hayate motivation to improve as a pilot. And he and Freya, at the same time, with the same poses, both resolve to prove themselves to their respective mentors.
And there's that short little bit at the end where Machina and Reina talk about, what were Freya and Hayate separated at birth or something like that, they say. Because they're just like, they're laughing at how much Freya and Hayate are on the same wavelength.
Oh
Yeah.
man. Also, my ship has been confirmed.
You like that, huh?
Oh, yeah, that whole thing with Machina and Reina. Dear God, yeah,
What was the
there
line?
is so much sexual tension going on there. It's ridiculous.
What was it? It was like squishy, squishy, soft, soft or something. And she's pinching Makina's cheeks. And then she pokes her boobs and I'm like, that's it. It's canon.
That's it.
My ship
It's
has
done.
sailed.
Even if they don't show anything else between these two characters, it's already too late. They have clearly shown enough that anybody who, isn't dead yet can see that there's something clearly going on between these two characters.
I called it from the start.
You were very, very good. Yeah.
It's Aaron and Messer in the locker room and in the hallway. Chad, you sounded like you had something to say about that.
I believe it is a very important character moment that's there. And all it is just Arid and Messer having a moment with each other, implying Messer needs to take it easy because reasons. It's not really explained why, but apparently Arid is concerned about Messer to some degree. Maybe Arid knows that Messer is more vulnerable to the VAR than any of the other pilots on Delta Squadron right now for whatever reason, I'm not sure. Or maybe he's just, he knows what Messer's like and he's just concerned about, having problems with his star pilot sort of thing. So it's a good little exchange. Kaname comes in very soon in this scene and with an offer of a night out, to which Arad is thrilled. But again, Messer proves that he's very unsociable. And he ends up declining, much to the disappointment of both Arad and Kaname. I think they were hoping that Messer would get a little bit more involved. I'm not sure if this plays into my theory or not. That the social aspects and one's fondness, or I guess integration with culture, is what keeps the VAR away, sort of thing.
See, that gave me a little bit more insight into Messer, and I'm probably speculating a lot with him. It gave me this impression that he's kind of hypercritical of himself. Someone in the earlier discussion in the restaurant remarked about how Messer flies in a perfectly straight line,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
he's constantly refusing like social outings, invitations in the times that he's gotten them in the series so far. And especially right now, he's really stressed. Like Arad is reminding Messer, take it easy, it's okay. And I think part of why he's saying that is not just because Messer's thinking about everything else, but he's probably being especially harsh on himself as a pilot. Knowing that he was vulnerable to the VAR for even a minute is probably eating him up. And now he's got war to deal with. So,
It makes you wonder what happened to the guy.
yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next thing. I know Celia, this is her favorite subject. Windermere.
Yeah, this one was cool. This was really cool. Especially because we had I think we had speculated before in a previous episode that there may have been ruins in other places.
Yeah.
And this one confirmed it. Like on the planet, I think it's Airburl, they have the
Mhm.
ruins of Rigstania. And Heinz's voice is resonating with those ruins from the Shrine of Time on Windermere.
And didn't that look a lot like the symbols that were in Macross Zero? I don't know if you remember that.
It reminded me vaguely of that, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Chad? You know what scene we're talking about?
I do, yeah, and it's very possible there could be a connection. It certainly wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for Macross. They've done it before. But yeah, I was also looking for something like that as well. And this episode did kind of confirm that they're using these sorts of runes, I guess, across systems on various different planets and whatnot to get their message across, their controlling force from the VAR syndrome, and what they're using it
Hmm.
for. It's just interesting too that they can now, like, they have such control over the VAR to a certain extent. I guess they can use it for pacification as well as disruption, and it's interesting. I think that definitely explains why they're so successful in their conquering of these worlds with like relative ease. And I think it also might play into some of the aspects of the Windermerean politics, why Royd is such like this force for, I guess propaganda, you could call it, because maybe he understands this about the Windsinger and the runes and what they can do with them. Maybe he knows that there are protoculture remnants and different sorts of sites on all these different
Hmm.
planets that they can use to take advantage of the Windsinger's song and the VAR syndrome to control these populations and to take them over for their own purposes.
Did the protoculture put that there, or are their descendants preconditioned to make stuff like that? But from Macross Zero, it seemed like they were there before the Mayans were there, and that's something that they found and ended up worshiping somehow. You know me, I love Macross Zero. Dang it. And I've seen it so many times. I've only seen it once. But
Are so down on that series, I'll tell you.
but Celia, what were you saying about the Winnie?
Actually, since there is so much of this that reminds me of Zero, it kind of makes me want to revisit Zero.
What?
Yeah. I know Zero
Okay.
wasn't great, but it
Aye,
reminds
aye,
me it
aye.
reminds me it reminds me just enough of it though that I'm like, okay, I need to go back and see what other connections I can find. Because initially I know Macross Delta was described as Macross 7 meets Macross Plus, and I've seen a little teeny bit of Plus in like the stage performances and the way that they're done. And with the song with the VAR syndrome is very similar to how Sharon Apple would hypnotize her audience with her music. But there's more and more of Zero popping up than I initially expected. So now I kind of want to go back and revisit that.
I'm gonna wait till the end of the series to see if it's even worth it for me. I'm just gonna wait.
Tell you. Well, I guess I'll be the lone voice of reason. Somebody's got to stand up for Zero here. I'll tell
I thought you were gonna be the lone voice of reason. Why are you standing up for Zero?
you. Nice, very nice. Okay, just moving on with it. It's just
Yeah.
they talk to
Uh
Heinz about how Heinz is having problems, and Royd suggests, I guess, lessening his I was going to say screen time, his singing time. It's like Royd is his agent. It's like, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to cut you out.
Did Royd mention that?
Yes, he
yes.
talks to Heinz about it and suggests that Heinz sort of like back off on his singing for a while to give him time to, I guess, to recover, or just not to put so much strain on him, because so much of the Windermerian campaign, I guess, depends upon Heinz doing his thing. So a lot is resting on his shoulders. So I think Royd is trying to protect his asset as much as possible, because he's thinking 10 steps down the road about the outcome of the war and what they're going to do. And then this obviously provides an opportunity for Keith to come in and again snub his nose at Royd. Obviously, that part of their relationship is not going away. In fact, it's only intensifying. But Keith is just continually doing like his own thing, defying any sort of authority that Royd might have whenever he can get away with it, and just asserting himself wherever possible. He says that they had some sort of problem with scouts in the Starwind sector or something like that, and Keith took it upon himself to deal with them and eliminate them on his own. And Royd was apparently unaware of any of this and is not happy. And then Keith just doesn't even acknowledge his concerns. He goes directly to Heinz and says, "Your Highness, or Your Majesty, we need you to secure the Starwind sector, and we're gonna, we're going to go ahead and do that now. Can we count on you to help us do that sort of thing? And much to, I guess, Royd's chagrin, Hines agrees, and they make preparations for the invasion.
I think Keith acting of his own accord might ultimately be one of the things that'll be the downfall of Windermere attempting to take back what they thought was taken from them by the unified government. Because if Keith is leading everyone separately and doing basically whatever he wants and not following the plan the way Royd is intending to do it, that can make it very difficult to have a successful campaign when you have two different parties going in two different directions.
I can see him easily turning into like a crazy super villain at one point, and maybe even leading to some sort of reversal of the Windermerean position in some respects.
Well, you can even see a change in his perspective too with Hines, where before when Hines would address him, he ignored it. But this time he's going directly to Hines. It's almost like he's understanding his standing with Hines as his brother and using him, manipulating him to get what he wants. So Royd won't give the okay for Hines to sing in order to secure the sector that Keith wants. So Keith just goes straight to Hines and says, "I need you." And I get this feeling from Hines that he really is drawn to Keith anyways, and he wants to connect to his brother, but Keith isn't really reciprocating that. And there's a scene later in the episode too that confirms that for me, where he's utilizing the relationship that he has with Hines right now, and the way that Hines views him as an older brother in order to get the things from Hines that he wants.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree.
I'm really surprised that Royd let him take that walk. I mean, that's a whole other scene, but I was watching that and I was like, wow, you let him go?
Oh, I think he snuck him.
That's what I think
I
too.
think he snuck him. Yes.
The next scene is like Mirage struggling with internal doubt.
Yes.
And then we have, in addition to that, we have Hayate comes along a little bit later to cheer her up. But apparently, Mirage is sort of struggling a bit with the shadow of her family's legacy. There has been, in addition to Max and Milia, there has been apparently just so many genus pilots, and they've all had sort of their moment in history. And I think Mirage is kind of struggling with her own because she's got the tools, definitely as a pilot, to become somebody that can do great things. But I think Mirage is sort of uncertain about whether or not she has the personality to achieve great things. I think that's where she's having problems. And luckily, Hayate is there as a nice little part of the character relationship between the two to come in and just, pull Mirage out of her self doubt and just say, you know what, let's do this thing. Let's go our next training session. Let's just go and show these guys, what we can do, what we could pull off together, sort of thing. And we're gonna turn this around. And he just sort of has a really amazing effect on Mirage. And there's also an apple involved. So, what more do you need from a Macross Delta scene?
All right. On to the big battle. I was so proud of myself when I read the title. I'm like, yes, Eonides. This is going to be great. And then the subs came out and they're like, Eoni Death. And I'm like, oh, come on. But it would sound worse, I suppose, if it was Ionidesu.
I was gonna say, what if it's Ione Death?
Yeah. I thought it was like Greek. So I was really proud of myself when I could read it. This really kicks off this big scene with the battle, but also like a really important scene with Hayate and Mirage afterwards. And it's my favorite part of the whole episode, I think.
It's the whole episode to me, yeah.
All right, so it brings us to the planet Eoni Death, and there are spacey pilots that are trying to fend off their own units that have been infected with the VAR syndrome, and Delta Squadron has been called to respond to that and to try to suppress the VAR. They outfitted the VF-31s with sound boosters, put giant
Yeah.
speakers on them. I haven't seen
And
all of
fastbacks.
I haven't seen all of Macross 7, but I recognize that right away.
Yeah, they have the sound boosters are actually part of the multi-purpose pack that's part of the VF-31, right? Like they can put like whatever they want inside of there apparently, whether it's sound equipment or missiles or whatever.
We also find out in this episode too that this is Delta Squadron's first battle in space. Everything else that they've had, every other encounter has been on a planet. This is the first time that they'll actually be out in space facing an enemy.
Yeah, I noticed that because that's the first time we see them putting on the fast packs on the VF-31s. But we're not really sure if that's their first, but it's definitely Hayate's.
Well, it sounded like Captain Mulders was talking to everybody.
Oh, did he say that?
Yeah, Captain Mulders was talking to everyone and saying, this is our first time in space. Try not to run out of propellant. Here are some general safety tips that you should follow, type
Well,
of
what was
thing.
I doing? Not reading the subs.
I remember reading it and just being super surprised because even though, I mean, Hayate's the least experienced on there, so I thought he would be the one that had never fought in space before. And then Mirage said that she had served in the UN Spacey for a short time, so I thought she would have at least fought in space before. But it sounds like this is the first time that Delta Squadron all together have fought as a team in space.
I know what I was doing. I was watching them putting on the fastbacks on, and then the whole sequence just like looked so amazing, when they were on the launch pad and everything. I was just like, wow, this is awesome.
It was
It looked
so
good,
good.
yeah. And they were actually adding a bit more to that as well. There were also armored sections that they were adding.
Yes.
So it looked like there was at least some maybe a nod to the idea that there could be an armored mode maybe for the VF-31 as well. So that would be very interesting because I always loved the armored Valkyries. I think there's such a great tradition with the Macross productions. It would be great to see an armored VF-31 for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw that
Yeah.
one scene when they added it on. And not only is it a great tradition, but they're great sellers for those toys, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Celia, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I caught
The big
myself.
battle.
I caught myself looking at Mirage's VF-31 on Ami Ami today. Like I want it.
Tempting.
Did you pull the trigger?
No, I have so many pre-orders right now. Let's see. So for the rest of this, once they're out in space, we're introduced to a new Valkyrie song. I don't have the title for that. I actually wasn't able to find one. And I thought it was cool that they had the Valkyrie members like projected on the asteroids.
That was awesome.
That was
Yeah.
really cool. Everything about this fight was just animated really well. Like I remember going back when Arad draws out his knives and then he crosses them as he's taking down one of the infected units. And I went back like probably 3 or 4 times to try and get the exact screenshots I wanted because it was so cool. It was visually really awesome. And then there's a point where Keith and Messer recognize each other.
Yeah.
Oh man, he sees him and he's like White Knight, and then Messer says Grim Reaper, and this just was great. There was one girl I was talking to on Twitter when I was live tweeting it who was all like, "Yes, I ship them because they hate each other." And I thought about that when I saw that scene, even without subs. Where I'm like, "Yep, there it is. There's the Fujoshi fodder that everyone's looking for." But because they recognize each other right away and by their titles, you know that it's about to go down.
And there could be a new rivalry between Hayate and Bogue, right?
Potentially. Bogue is such a loose cannon that honestly, I think that they're very similar in a lot of ways, except Bogue is more violent. I think that's where they definitely differ. Where Hayate is more pacifist and Bogue is ready to shoot just about anything out of the sky. But they're very similar, I think, in their impulsivity and in the way that they use their techniques. But I don't know if there's a rivalry just yet.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. It seemed like it because like he went after Freya and that just screwed up Hayate big time,
Yeah. Well, what happened with that part in particular, Bogue got the twins to go in with him on a formation to attack Valkyrie directly. All the other units were busy. Hayate actually got stuck with Theo and Shao at one point because he's trying to catch up to Messer while Messer's in the middle of a dogfight with Keith, which was dumb. Hayate really shouldn't have done that. And I thought it was funny how he scrapes up his VF-31 without actually doing anything after Machina made all those comments about how horribly he treats his VF-31. And he's just like scraping it along this asteroid. But yeah, he ends up fending off Theo and Shao at one point. This battle is also really, I think, really nice for building some supports between Mirage and Hayate because they're both resolving to do better. maybe not for the same motivations, but because of that, they're supporting each other at an early point in the battle. Where Mirage is like, hey, there are these coming in, in case you didn't notice them, and calling out to each other and letting each other know that they have their backs and warning when other units are coming close.
I was actually really hoping that this would happen because up until this point, they've had a really good reason to write Freya and Hayate with a connection. And I was kind of feeling for the longest time that Mirage was she had no inroad with Hayate as far as like an integral relationship with him, other than like character work outside of outside of the flying. But now with this episode, we see that there's going to be like a direct connection between Mirage and Hayate in a very intimate sort of way, in that they're going to be working together as close together as a team, and we see in this episode that they are excellent together.
Yeah, especially with the scene that comes right after. Chad, what did you think about the big red shirt guy that just came out of nowhere for this episode?
Yeah, that was
Lieutenant Uro.
yeah, that was totally a setup for both for Hayate's character and also for Herman's character as well. I think this will be something that pushes Herman's engagement in the conflict to date up to the next level because he is clearly going to be affected by this loss. This looks like another sort of student that was under his wing and who he was going to take to his first kill, maybe even in Herman's mind, his first step towards manhood or something like that as well. Seems like it was quite personal. And we get the added bonus of having a sort of like a final showdown where Hayate has sort of been zooming all over the place, and he was actually warned about being careful not to use up so much of your propellant, but Hayate has just been bouncing back and forth between like the forward engagement area where all the fighting is taking place, then back to the Aether, then from the Aether back to the forward engagement area, and he eventually runs out of propellant and has to take some desperate shots while Herman and his wingmen that he's trying to get to his first kill are basically ganging up on Mirage. And Mirage looks a little bit overwhelmed and she's having problems. She's sort of got her Valkyrie backed up against an asteroid and she's just taking hit after hit against her mech from the Windermerian and his Draken, and her pinpoint barriers are just running out of juice, and Hayate is too far away to get engaged on anything other than like a long distance shot. So he ends up taking it and ends up destroying the attacking Draken in a very spectacular sort of fashion that surprises Mirage, certainly surprises Herman, and surprises Hayate himself. He's shocked and dismayed at what he did, but also knew that he had to do it, because it was Mirage who was on the line.
Yeah.
And so it just leads to an incredible character moment.
In this sequence in particular, too, you see Freya and Hayate parallel each other a little bit once again, where they both have a big shock to overcome. I think Hayate's is a little bit more significant than Freya's. I mean, Bogue tries to attack her and calls her a traitor and tries to kill her because he feels that she's betrayed Windermere. Hayate killed a man for the first time, and they both have to come to terms with what they've done and why they're continuing on the path that they've chosen because of what's happened in this battle.
I don't know. I would definitely not want to undermine what Freya's going through. I mean, yeah, taking a life is pretty much one of the big no-nos, but at the same time, it's a vicious comment. It's something I think that hits Freya in a way that nothing else could. Like, it's one thing for everybody to sort of suspect Freya from the chaos side, from the UN Spacey side, but I think this is something very different. This is the first time that a Windermerian has taken a look at Freya and said that Freya was a traitor, and that's just like shocking to Freya's core. And I think later on in the episode, Mikumo tries to convince Freya to just shake it off, but I don't think it's going to be shaken off that easily.
Yeah. And Celia, right after the battle, Hayate is also kind of like bummed out until Mirage just tries to pick him up.
Yeah, I really like that scene, actually.
It's a really good scene.
It was an excellent scene. It was an excellent relation building scene between Mirage and Hayate. Where Mirage has tried to comfort Freya with her own experiences, and it kind of backfired before. But this time when Mirage approaches Hayate and talks to him about her own experience the first time she had to kill somebody, about how everyone else on the Delta Squadron also feels the same burden and the same confliction and the same pain as Hayate, even if they've done it dozens of times over in times of war and other skirmishes, that it weighs on them just the same, and that he's not alone in feeling that way. And it was just a really great scene, and I think it added to the realism of the story. That yes, Hayate, he killed somebody, and typically when you look at that in an anime in particular, unless it's doing that very intentionally, a lot of times that happens and then no one bats an eye. I just killed someone for the first time, but I'm okay 20 minutes later. But Hayate looks like he's been pondering about this ever since they returned to Ragna, so that's at least for a day or two.
Yeah, and then somebody was listening in.
Yeah, so this was interesting actually. Reading some of the discussions before the subs came out, a lot of people had interpreted the scene where Mikumo is telling Freya that she needs to get over Bogue calling her a traitor, or she can get out of Walkure. Like, I think she even says we don't need someone who like falters when someone calls them a traitor or something like that. I can't remember the exact line right now.
Something about how do you let one word get to you so much, or something like that.
Yeah, and initially before the subs came out, a lot of people interpreted that as them saying, "Go to Hayate, he needs you."
Whoa.
It's very different than the actual context, because Freya does go to Hayate. And so far,
Yeah.
Hayate has been her point of contact. When she's feeling conflicted or when she's feeling down, he's the person that she talks to. They are friends truly in that sense, I think,
Hmm.
because she feels like she can connect with him and talk to him when she's feeling bothered by things and things that are really important to her. And so that's why she goes to approach him, I think, is not because not because Mikumo says, "He needs you, go to him," which was
Yeah.
really funny when the subs came out and everybody was wrong. It was just hilarious because no one saw that coming. But then when Freya does go to talk to Hayate, Mirage is there first, and she listens in, and really, I think, questions herself more. Where Hayate and Mirage are talking a little bit about, what is my motivation, devoting my life to this cause and to this war, if it's really worth it. And they both commit to it. But Freya is still questioning herself. It even closes out on that scene with her saying, you know, what am I doing with my life? Questioning whether or not she's made the right choice.
Yeah, when she was so sure in the beginning, this is my path,
Hmm.
and now she's doubting it.
Yeah. I don't think it established our triangle romantically any further, but I definitely think, like, if you look at the cinematography, like, it's definitely establishing it. Like, just the way I had to take a screenshot because it was just so nicely done, where Freya
Yeah.
just looks really unsure, and then you have Hayate and Mirage in the background together. In the prior episode, we had scenes where we had our triangle all together in the same frame and everyone was part of the same interaction, but now we're back to that isolation again, where we have two of the three interacting and one being left to the side. And it seems so far that that's being used to portray the character that's undergoing some sort of conflict so far, like an inner conflict. It's really cool.
There's literally a line between Hayate and Raj and Freya where she's in the dark and they're like in the bright sunlight, you know.
Hmm.
It's very symbolic. Yeah, that was a good scene.
I loved it so much.
So Chad, we talked about this earlier. The scene where Keith is leading up Heinz up the side of that mountain.
Yeah, we have this sequence that takes place on Windermere, where we have the an area called Scarfell, old town of Carlisle, and Keith is leading his little brother Heinz on a journey to an outcropping of mountain, where Keith describes the scars of their shame, which turns out to be a massive crater right in the Windermerean mountain range. And they actually mentioned these scars. I don't think that we talked about it earlier in the episode, but Keith actually mentions these scars earlier in the episode. And so this is the second mention of this idea that Windermere has somehow been scarred by the UN Spacey in some way. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what that means. I don't even know exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at some sort of crater that has, it looks like it has some sort of either volcanic or atmospheric or maybe even more exotic sort of reaction currently going on in it. Maybe it was the result of a reaction weapon explosion.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what we're looking at yet, but it's clear that it's some sort of bad thing that happened to Windermere, and that's maybe part of the reason why the Windermerians have such animosity towards the UN Spacey. And this is the sort of what Keith is going to be using to manipulate Hines into doing what he wants.
And that's the end of the episode.
But the preview for the next episode is really interesting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we have a post credits clip with this episode.
Yeah, they mention Lady M, so now we know it's not Mikumu or Mirage because they're in the meeting.
What if it's Milia?
Yeah, I was thinking it's either
That would
Milia or maybe Mirage's mom starts with an M also.
like if it's Milia, like I would totally understand all the pressure that Mirage is feeling because her grandmother's calling the shots.
Oh man,
Oh, that's
is your grandmother that scary? Is that what you're saying?
no. My grandmother's not, but if my grandmother was Milia, she might be. She can be quite intense.
Yeah, and they show Mirage in cat disguise.
Yes, they're going to be going on an infiltration mission on the planet Voldor in the next episode. I actually think it's going to be similar to what they were already doing on Al Shahal, like when they
Mhm.
were in disguise there already. So we might be seeing a little bit more in depth of something that we saw just bits and pieces of in the first episode.
Cool. Chad, you got anything to add?
Well, what would an anime be without a cat girl? So I guess we got to have one of those in there as well.
She's got to match the sea cats.
They're hitting all the points for the otaku fetishes.
Oh, God.
Oh yeah, let's do the comments really quick.
I hope I pronounced his last name right. All right, so this is from the Facebook page from Joseph Yonis. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce your last name. He's been a longtime fan of Macross and is really enjoying Delta so far. But his question is, do you think we will ever see the protoculture? It seems that we're getting close to seeing them, even more so finding out about the Mega Road commanded by Misa Hayase. In Macross Frontier, we see an aging Zentradi wanting to find Minmay. So will we see this to really connect all of the Macross franchise?
Do you remember that scene about Minmay and Centrati wanting to find her?
I do. I don't remember his name, and I looked all day to try to find it, and I could not find his name. But there is a Zentradi who has a locket with Minmay's picture in it.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
He has a locket with her picture in it.
Okay.
For his question, I don't know if we will see the protoculture. It sounds like that they were meant to exist a lot earlier in Macross
Yeah,
than
I'm voting no. I
than
think they're done.
but I do think we're going to find out more about them. Since
Yeah.
Windermere is claiming to be direct descendants to the protoculture, and there are ruins in more places than just Windermere. And I was reading on, where was it? I think it was Random Sea. It was a blog post about the protoculture. That at some point the protoculture were working on like time travel stuff, but then didn't continue it because of the consequences that go with messing around with time and going back and forth. But the shrine that they use on Windermere is called the Shrine of Time, so that stuck out to me in particular.
Ooh.
I don't know. I don't think we'll actually get to see protoculture themselves,
No,
but
I don't
I
think so.
definitely think we're going to find out more about them.
And as far as the Mega Road, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's other Mega Road class ships out there, right?
Oh yeah, there was. I mean, according to the official trivia, I think we know. I want to say a dozen different ones so far. I'm not really sure. Yeah, there's at least 13 commissioned, and we have names and commission dates for them. So there was quite a few of them that went out, and I don't know how many in total there were supposed to be, but they were also part of like long range colonization fleets in the early days of the post Space War One expansion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I have a two-parter from Michael Phoenix. The first one I'm going to read is more something that Celia touched upon. I think Mikumo is like Grace from Frontier. I wonder, it's a fold crystal embedded in her that's making her voice so strong. What do you think of that,
Oh,
Celia?
I'm glad to know I'm not alone in fearing that Mikomo will become like Grace. um, I'm not so sure. Mikomo, she's the mysterious Venus. Like I still have quite a few questions about her that haven't been answered just yet. We already know she has a high fold wave output,
Yeah.
but that could be though. Like for Ronka, it was because she had microorganisms in her body that resonated with the Vajra. So we know that
Hmm.
there are other things that, and then of course you have the runes from the Windermerians. So there are other biological ways that the fold waves can resonate other than using fold quartz.
And then his second question is, do you think the person that gave her the iPod was killed when the Windermere revolted? We see her standing in front of a crash or fire. I'm not even sure if we're gonna find out. I don't know if that's like an important thing. That'd be an interesting find out who gave her that iPod, as everybody's calling it.
Yeah.
But they could have gave her that after the fire, just maybe to make her feel better. So we don't know what point she got that.
Well, she got it when the UN Spacey initially came to Windermere
Yeah, it's definitely somebody.
before the War for Independence. So we know that.
Wait,
Yeah, because
well,
they show a mega road showing up on Windermere.
but that was their first encounter with the UN
Ah,
species. So the war came after that.
true. For Freya though, I think for Freya it probably was pre-Independence War. Because if you think about it, she's 15. That doesn't really look like a fairly recent piece of technology.
Hmm.
So it could be something that's at least 7 years old, like something she got maybe at the start of the war, because it was from someone who was visiting. So it was before they put up the dimensional barrier to keep people from going in and out.
True.
Yeah, I know that like it'd probably be really cool, and I think what some people are hoping for is that the mega road that came to Windermere is the one that has Misa and Hikaru and Minmay on it.
Yeah.
um, as when I was reading about the mega road, and that they lost contact with it 4 years into its mission, I think that's Kawamori's way of saying that they're just wrapping up that storyline
Yeah.
and moving on to other things.
Oh, we have a message from one of our listeners. Chad, the guy with the locket in Frontier was Richard Burla, owner of the SMS.
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah, I know you guys were struggling with that one, but I remembered him specifically. Yeah. He comes up in the series actually multiple times. He's never a major character, but he is definitely someone who is working behind the scenes, and he's kind of part of the backstory for Macross Frontier.
So we have a two-parter from Sean Salisbury. I think the protoculture might have created the Windermere people in order to control their creations from afar, and that the VAR syndrome might be something the protoculture genetically added to the races it made in order to control them. Maybe, but I'm not sure. I think that's something that they're finding out on their own and using against the humans. But I think the humans also think that they're the ones that are the descendants of the protoculture that's been sent out to reign in peace across the galaxy.
Well, and so far it's only confirmed that the Zentradi were engineered by the protoculture, right?
Yeah. Well, engineered and but the protoculture did go out and I guess seed across the universe. I
Aliens,
mean,
man. Who knows?
aliens.
Who
And then his
knows?
second question is another thing. I think that the carrier ship can't transform like the Macross or the Quarter because in battle in episode 6, if it could have, it would have. Yeah, I don't think we ever said that it would transform into like a giant robot like the Macross. I think we mentioned that it transformed when it was launching from the Elysion. And that's it. That's the last of the messages. So let's close it out. Celia, where can we find you when you're not on the Macross Delta recap show?
You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Celia Rose Cosplay and on Twitter at Planets Twinkle. I live tweet Macross Delta every Sunday.
And Chad, where can we find you?
You can visit my website at Macross Mecha Manual. You can also find me at for the Macross Mecha Manual, which is facebook.com/Macross Mecha Manual. You can contact me via email at marchingcw@hotmail.com. And you can also find me posting on various anime message boards such as ANN, Anime Nation, and Macross World.
This is EXO. You can find me on the Macross World Facebook page or the Macross Delta Facebook page, or you could tweet at me at Macross Tweet on Twitter. And we'll see you next week when we review the next episode, Behind Enemy Lines. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.